What's going on, man? I know you're in your car today. I know Matt Nagy's got COVID. I know COVID's hot in Florida, so it makes sense as to why your little bubble is Matt Nagy. But what's up, man?
Yeah, I personally don't have COVID, but I figured that if the head coach of a professional football franchise can give a press conference from his car, that I can record a YouTube video from the car as well. So a little bit one and the same. I guess that's what the standard of professionalism in sports is now. Um, I mean, I have nothing against being sick and trying to find an environment, but you'd figured you'd probably have a place to do that. Not a dig at Matt Nagy at all. I hope he recovers. I hope he doesn't show any symptoms. COVID is a two-headed beast, like the Bears played on Sunday. Either you get something or you get nothing at all. So hopefully Matt will recover well. Of course, we as fans should never wish physical illness on anyone. But you know, let's talk about the game. Let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about absolute crazy takes on Twitter. There's a lot to talk about right now. Now, 2 weeks ago, we were pretty high on this team, and we put out a video that was questioning whether or not this team could potentially make a push for the playoffs. And I would like to personally apologize for putting that out there and then having these past 2 weeks come to fruition. We had no idea that it was going to be this bad. We probably should have known. We got a little caught. We were a little too optimistic. But here we are, 2-game losing streak. Really, the answers are very clear as to why we're losing. But let's break down the Bucks a little bit. What did you see specifically that pointed to an absolute blowout?
Let's take this back about a month. And it's funny I say exactly about a month because, I mean, a month's 4 weeks. And so you remember the game plan that the Bears trotted out week 3 against the Browns. A lot of 5 and 6 man protections, absolutely zero help from the tight ends in terms of pass blocking against a really good front seven. And what was the result? Well, yeah, there were a couple good plays here and there by the Bears running game and the running game specifically, but then there are also a lot of issues in the passing game. Now, you saw the exact same thing come to fruition, and I'm not going to knock Justin Fields as a passer here at all because he's shown when things are going well, he can be a really good quarterback and he can actually be better than some of these other rookies, okay? But the issue for the Bears comes down to this. It's just like the game plan that they rolled out there against the Cleveland Browns was basically in a lot of ways similar to the one that was rolled out there against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, there's two key differences here. Number one, there were a couple of different personnel packages because there were times the Bears tried to outmatch the Bucks and go with 6 or 7 man protections. That was one thing. So a couple different personnel packages in an effort to help the quarterback. But those different personnel packages were the result of a different play caller as well as a team realizing and recognizing that, hey, running the ball and running the offense to Khalil Herbert right now is basically the best thing that we can do. And so ultimately, that's what was going on. Now, you talk about the defensive side of the ball. I mean, I don't think this defense is going to allow 35 points in the first half like they did on Sunday the rest of the season. And the reason I say that is because you're talking about two key defensive starters being out in Akeem Hicks as well as Robert Quinn. And yeah, those guys are getting older. Those guys are not going to be on this roster come 2023 or 2024. But you also have to understand something is that those guys make it easier for Khalil Mack to do what he does. When I think people have to understand what's a 3-4 defense, right? You have 3 down linemen, you have 4 linebackers. Those 3 linemen, the 3 defensive linemen, when they're big as guys like Goldman, Bilal Nichols, Akeem Hicks are, you're playing a 2-gap system, which means each defensive lineman is responsible for 2 gaps. Okay. That in turn allows the pass rushers and the linebackers on the second level, like a Roquan Smith, like a Khalil Mack, to get after the quarterback. That gives basically the second level, the linebackers, more flexibility to do whatever. The Bears didn't have that added flexibility against a really strong aerial attack and a pretty damn good running game, too. So ultimately, for anyone that's out there blaming the defense, yeah, 35 points is way too much in the first half. But also look at it, they were way more shorthanded. You could actually argue this right now. Take out the right tackle situation. The offense was at full strength, and I know it's a terrible way to put this, but the offense was at full strength in terms of the starters being ready to go compared to whatever the defense trotted out there.
Yeah. I mean, we said this at the season preview that this Bears secondary was going to struggle against the elite quarterbacks in the league. And you can't really get more elite than Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers in back-to-back weeks, right? Like maybe, I don't know, Lamar Jackson down the line, Kyler Murray down the line, Russell Wilson probably won't be able to come back by the time we face off with the Seahawks. But like I said at the beginning of the season, this is the toughest schedule that the Bears have had in a long time. And it's going to be a real test on their passing defense. And it's very clear that the passing defense didn't understand the why they were out there. And it's very clear that Tom Brady understood the assignment and got his 4 touchdowns and was able to put his 4 fingers up because he actually knew what they meant this time. So looking back at this game, we can write a lot of it off because it was just infuriating to watch. And it was just a terrible display of offense and defense. But there are things that we need to look at that are ultimately good takeaways because every team, especially a young developing team, needs to learn from its losses. Like I say, the only thing that Matt Nagy says that I agree with is going back from losses and going, what did we do right? You know, what did we do wrong? What can we learn? So Khalil Herbert was the first rusher to put up 100 yards against the Buccaneers this season. And one of like, I don't know the real number, but I'm going to take a stab. Maybe like 4 or 5 in the past 2 seasons that's been able to put up 100 yards on this Bucs defense. That's a really good number. Now, granted, the Bucs defense has been a little banged up in the secondary, but Khalil Herbert, 6th round pick. I mean, we can't talk about how much this kid is doing for our offense. He's going to take touches away from David Montgomery when he comes back because you'd be stupid not to keep feeding this kid the ball. But now you have the question, what am I going to do with David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert? They're basically the same exact backs. There's not a lot of difference between the two. One's not a power guy. One's not a speed guy. They're both pretty much power elusive guys. So what do you do? That's a big question coming down the line. I don't have an answer right now, but we have to give props to this running game. They seem to know what they're doing, and we're putting up 100 yards consistently. Now, what absolutely blows my mind, and again, this has to do with, we're going to talk about Justin Fields here, is not putting Justin Fields in positions to be successful. Absolutely blows my mind that you put up 100 yards rushing game in and game out, yet you refuse to run the play action. That makes 0 sense to me from an offensive standpoint. You're pounding the rock consistently. Teams are loading the box because they're trying to stop your rushing attack because it's so lethal. You're averaging 5 yards a carry. What are you going to do? Well, let's put into play action. And guess what? Statistics have shown that Justin Fields is lighting it up every time they run a play action play. There's little to no excuse that this offense is not relying on the rush and the play action passing attack and using some of the tight ends that we have at our disposal. Now, I would like to say Justin had, like you said this on Twitter, and I completely agree with you. Justin had a better game than games in the past against the Buccaneers. We take away some of those ridiculous turnovers. And it's hard to say, let's take away 5 turnovers, right? Because that's kind of a scary number. But again, the first turnover of the game, sabotaged by his coaching staff, right? Allen Robinson didn't know what was going on. He didn't think it was a dead play, but it's because Allen Robinson doesn't have a mic in his helmet. He doesn't have anything in his helmet telling him, hey, this is a free flow. They have 12 men on the field. So he didn't know what was going on. The communications between him and Justin Fields isn't built there because, like we've been saying for weeks, they didn't practice over the summer. What you're seeing right now is the cultivation of 4 or 5 weeks of practice, which is like 2 to 3 days a week with a couple of games in between them. That's an indictment. That should be a fireable offense that your rookie quarterback has 0 to no experience with the most talented players on your roster, and it's costing you games, but you want to go out ahead and start him anyways. If you're going to say that our quarterback doesn't have enough time with our starters, that's a completely understandable excuse, but don't put him out there simply because you want to put him out there. If he's not ready to play with the starters, then say that. But don't go ahead and walk back on your decision and say, oh, no, Justin Fields is our guy. Let's throw him out there, completely sabotage him. So at the end of the season, when I say I told you so, Andy should have been the guy starting, everybody with half a brain on Twitter goes, oh, my God, Matt Nagy was right. Let's give him his job back. Absolutely not. I'm not going to let that fly. There's 0 excuse for this going on. This is just a piss poor management of a locker room. And the players today, while Matt Nagy was stuck in his car at a press conference with COVID, came out and completely exposed him. Jason Peters and Allen Robinson did the biggest thing that I've seen from Bears players in a long time, which is complain as players about the coaching staff.
And it's not even complain as players about the coaching staff. The way they did it, which was complain publicly in what is the third biggest media market in the country, which means that you know that for the rest of basically today, and we're recording this on Tuesday, as well as Wednesday morning for Mullion Hall, the only thing you're going to hear on Chicago sports radio, including 670 The Score, WGN, and ESPN, is going to be Matt Nagy and the Bears. But I want to touch base here on, and again, we'll dive more extensively into a really stupid Justin Fields narrative in just a moment here. We have O-line talk coming up first. You have to, give, as our guy Dave Gettleman for Fireside Giants would say, or by Mr. Gettleman would say, for our friends over at Fireside Giants, Alex and Anthony, got to give love to the Hog Mollies first. Here's the thing. The turnovers, there deserves to be a damn break for those turnovers because Justin Fields was in this game, 22 for 32, 184 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 fumbles lost. And on the season, he's got 2 passing touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Now, if you take away 2 of the interceptions, it's realistically the stat line is 2 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. And the reason I say that is because one of the interceptions was, again, on one a play that should have been a free play against Green Bay. The second one was against the Buccaneers where Allen Robinson slipped, and it was merely Justin recognizing and understanding, hey, this is an advantage where this is a situation, where I can take advantage of the quarterback. Which, side note, by the way, people should actually be happy that Justin Fields is making these mistakes because he's a rookie, and your rookie season's all about making mistakes and learning. Because it's like, would you rather make these mistakes in year 1 or in years 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, like some other Bears quarterbacks have done? But we'll get to quarterbacks in a moment here. Let's talk offensive line. What's happening is this, right? Is that Jason Peters basically revealed, okay, Larry Borum's going to be back this week. He's coming back from his sprained ankle, so good to see him back. You're going to get Tevin Jenkins back hopefully in a couple weeks here, which I think that Tevin Jenkins was more so on schedule because the Bears put him on IR, but it was never really – it was always a matter of he was going to miss the first 2 months of the season, and the timeline was roughly around Thanksgiving, and we're about 3 to 4 weeks away from Thanksgiving here. But Larry Borum coming back is big because I tweeted this today, Max, and I don't know if you saw it, and again – I tweet crazy stuff all the time because I'm just unfiltered about the Bears. And when I say things that I say, most people have such a damn issue with it. It's ridiculous. But let me read my tweet word for word. I said, offensive tackle Larry Borum comes back at a perfect time for the Bears. 2 very winnable games against the 49ers and Steelers can get Chicago back into the playoff hunt, and Justin Fields back on track and playing at a high level. OL gets a much-needed boost. Now, I don't see a lie in that tweet, and here's why. Because let's break this first part down. Number 1, Larry Borum, a player that when he played at left tackle and right tackle, flashed a hell of a lot of potential, even though he was a 5th-round pick. Okay? Number 2, the Bears have 2 very winnable games coming up in week 8 and 9 against San Francisco as well as Pittsburgh. Okay, you could be looking up in a couple weeks, and all of a sudden, the Bears' record could go from 3-4 to they could be looking at 5-4 almost. Okay, which would realistically put them in contention for one of the lower seeds in the NFC for a playoff spot. Okay. And then a revamped offensive line is good for Justin Fields because he's not going to be getting hit on every single play. And then the offensive line is finally getting back a young piece of talent in Borum this week that a lot of people hope is going to be a guy that is here for the next 8, 10, 12 seasons almost. Okay. That's ultimately what's going on here. So I think that's the impact of solely Larry Borum returning.
Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with saying the Bears could beat the 49ers and the Steelers. Just looking at these 2 rosters in the past couple of weeks, the Steelers and the Niners don't look their best as they've had in years past. There's even people on Twitter wondering if Shanahan's on the hot seat. My answer is no. If he comes out and lays another egg next year, he may be looking for a new head coaching spot because there might be some issues there. But no, you're right. I'm not optimistic. I don't think the Bears are able to take away maybe at least one win. Maybe they're able to beat the Steelers. But I think this line is obviously an issue. I think that when the football starts in the trenches, right? They're won and lost in the trenches. Either you have your defensive line that's out there, that's pushing back the offensive line, getting in the quarterback's face, making him release the ball quicker than he wants to, stuffing the run, or your offensive line is helping the quarterback break the pocket, continue to block, give him time to make his reads, give your running back time to make some cuts, open up the holes. I don't have to explain fundamental football 101. So when we're looking at whether or not a rookie quarterback is having success, it all starts at the offensive line. If the snap isn't getting to his hands, if he has less than 2 seconds to throw a freaking ball, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Your quarterback, regardless of how good he is, isn't going to pick up every single blitz that a defense shows him. I don't care if it's Peyton Manning. I don't care if it's Tom Brady. They're not going to recognize 99.9% of the blitzes that come at them, okay? So I don't want to see anybody on Twitter go, well, Justin's just not picking up the blitz. Justin can call the blitz out all he wants. If the offensive line doesn't pick it up and make adjustments at the line, that means absolutely nothing. Justin can go, hey, 44 is the mic and he's rushing. If the center doesn't tap the right guard's ass and say, hey, 44 is coming, I'm going to split left, B gap, you take the A because I'm not going to chip. If that doesn't happen, Justin's screwed. He has to run immediately because he goes, wow, they just completely let me out there hanging dry. So you're completely right. At the second we get the tackle situation focused, because tackles are one of the most, if not the most important positions on the offensive line for pass protection. If that's not solidified, we have zero hope of getting Justin time to throw the ball. And I'm going to jump into it right now because I'm hot. There's zero reason we should be comparing Mitch Trubisky to Justin Fields this far into development. Mitch had raw athletic capabilities just like Justin week 5 when we're watching him for the first couple times, trying to feel out who this kid is compared to Mike Glennon, right? Well, Justin is able to read defenses better than Mitch has. Justin has been making good decisions better than Mitch has. Justin has been moving out of the pocket better than Mitch has. Justin has been showing deep ball accuracy better than Mitch has. When I remember when we drafted Mitch, right? The number one reason we drafted Mitch was because of his accuracy, correct? Everyone called him the most accurate passer in the draft, and he was just, the most fundamentally gifted quarterback that we could possibly get our hands on, so we traded up to get him. Where was the accuracy from Mitch Trubisky his second year? It wasn't there. Even the third, it wasn't there, right? So when we're looking at Justin Fields, I'm already going, wow, accuracy is there as advertised. Look at how many drops Justin has had this season this far. It's absolutely ridiculous. He should have more touchdowns in that stat that have been lost because of drops. It makes zero sense to me. The stats are somewhat comparable between the two, but Justin has more completions than Mitch Trubisky had at this point in his career. So I don't want to hear any comparisons between the two. They both have good arms. One is incredibly more fast. One is incredibly more accurate. And one is better at reading the defenses already, which is what you want your rookie quarterback to do. If we're already nitpicking about Justin Fields week 5 in his career, we should take a collective sigh of relief and go, oh my God, this kid is only going to get better from here. It makes no sense to me to completely give up on a kid that's 22 years old, that played 5 weeks in the NFL and already has guys who are analysts in the league sticking up for him and going, this kid has shown signs of brilliance in a really, 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 really bad situation. So I'm sorry if I'm really heated about this. It just makes absolutely no sense to make this comparison.
Look, people had issues with sorry, I had to clear my throat. But people had issues with Mitch Trubisky, right? There are the issues that the Bears passed up on two arguably more talented quarterbacks, or you could argue really one at the time in Deshaun Watson, because no one knew Patrick Mahomes was going to develop into what Patrick Mahomes developed into. for Mitch Trubisky. People had issues with Mitch Trubisky being a one-year starter. There were issues with, well, he didn't show enough on college tape. It was always, people had issues with, the play calling and the scheme, and that Mitch isn't doing this. He's got bad pocket presence. He's got, can't hit throws downfield. He can't read defenses. And there's three things that stick out to me, by the way. I think when you go back and look at the Mitch Trubisky era in Chicago, then the inability to hit deep balls, the inability to recognize when pressure was coming, the inability to read defenses and pick up blitz were common issues that plagued Mitch Trubisky, and just some of the reasons that people wanted him run out of town. Now, what have we seen in 5 starts from Justin Fields? We've seen that Justin's able to realize and understand when the pressure's coming. We've seen that Justin's able to hit the deep ball with consistency. Go back and look at the games against the Lions. I mean, he literally started that first drive against the Lions going 3 for 3, 48 yards total, all 3 completions to wide receiver Darnell Mooney on what were intermediate as well as deep throws. And he's done it time and time again. He's willing to take those shots down the field. People also had an issue with Mitch's inability to execute in certain situations. Justin hasn't shown an inability to execute in certain situations. Everyone can get better at something, and Justin can certainly get better. So the fact being that we and this Bears fan base gave Mitch Trubisky basically 3 full seasons or 3.5 seasons to get it figured out and to show that he could be the guy. And ultimately he wasn't. But then some people are just ready to write off Justin Fields after just 5 starts. Basically just shows that most of you don't know anything about quarterback development, and that most of you are legitimately better off just rooting for the Bears on Sunday solely because you're a Bears fan and not really throwing your opinions in social media out there. And I understand that sounds super harsh, because I understand everyone's entitled to an opinion, but you also have to know when to have an opinion and when not to have an opinion. And it's ridiculous, because it's just like Bears fans always do this. It's at a point where it's just like, this is just complete nonsense. And it's like every single time the offense isn't doing well and the team isn't doing well, the quarterback's the punching bag. They did the same thing with Jay Cutler. They did the same thing with Mitch Trubisky. All right. It was like the same thing with Nick Foles, sometimes even Andy Dalton. Right. And as much as we argue for and against why Andy Dalton should start, not even Andy Dalton, you could argue, got a fair rep from the fans. Okay. Just how it is. So unfortunately, it's just like you're at a point with this team, this fan base, this city where, nothing seems to work. And it's like, well, the quarterback's just going to be totally fine. Well, guess what? You know what? Let's take it back to the 2020 offseason, man. Some people didn't want some people didn't want Mitch Trubisky starting. And what did that lead to? Well, it led to Nick Foles. And all of these people were convinced, oh yeah, well, you know what? We're going to get rid of Mitch Trubisky, or Mitch Trubisky's going to be benched. We can trade him, and the next guy's automatically going to be better because all the same issues are going to be solved. Well, guess what happened? They did. They went out, they got a guy that was going to replace Mitch Trubisky in Nick Foles. And was the next guy better? No, he wasn't. Then you had the highest run-to-pass ratio in the NFL, and Nick Foles was very vocal in saying, yeah, this offense doesn't work, and basically threw Matt Nagy under the bus with the Monday Night Football crew of Brian Griese, Louis Riddick, as well as Steve Levy. And then you went out and you know what? You had to go back to Mitch Trubisky, and magically your offense started working. Why did your offense start working? One, because your play caller was a bit smarter. But number two, because the pieces that you brought in to run the scheme that Bill Lazor was running were more meant to benefit Mitch Trubisky, not Nick Foles by any means. And also, side note, let me just say this, right? Justin's going to be great, but I don't think Matt Nagy's going to be the guy that's going to see through Justin Fields' potential and development. Also, look, these tackles are coming back, so let's just keep this in mind. Larry Borum, Tevin Jenkins are rookies. That's awesome, okay? We have high hopes for all of them, okay? These are 2 incredibly talented players when healthy. I mean, every NFL player is talented when healthy because these guys are at the very top of their class in pretty much whatever they do. I don't care if you're an undrafted free agent or you are a first-round first pick guy, but the Bears need to be smart with these tackles coming back because they have to protect Justin, right? So that does not mean you go back to the 5-man protections automatically. No, what it means is that you don't put your tackles on an island just because they're the future and they're healthy. No, let them learn to play, but give them the help from the tight ends. Do that, all right? Give them the tight end to chip the pass rushers, and then go ahead and do this. Just design a situation and design routes and concepts where your tight ends are always going to be the check down option for Justin Fields. Also, you talked about drops and ball placement. I think Justin was 22 for 32 in this game, right? He threw, I think, 25 times the week prior, but he was 22 for 32 in this game. Right now, you could argue that, yeah, he had 10 incompletions, but hey, guess what? Realistically, he should have only had 5 or 6 incompletions. He's been that accurate, and it hasn't just been a combination of accuracy. It's been a combination of understanding accuracy, timing, where to place the ball, how to place the ball, when to identify to let this ball go. That's ultimately what it's been. And so this whole notion, as I'm going on this 6 or 7 minute rant here, that Justin Fields is Mitch Trubisky is something that needs to go completely out the window, because guess what? Justin, in 2 years at Ohio State, did more than Mitch Trubisky did in 1 year as a starter at North Carolina. And some of you guys are going to call me crazy for this, but Justin's 2019 season at Ohio State, you could argue that him just being a 1 year starter, his ceiling would probably be as high as it is right now if he were to come out in the 2020 draft.
Yeah, all of that and then some. 100%. When we think about quarterbacks, when we think about the fans in the city of Chicago, we think about one thing, the same thing, over and over and over and over and over again, right? And there's one name that's been consistent with this franchise through all the different general managers, through all the different head coaches, through all the different quarterbacks, and that's been Ted Phillips. Ted Phillips has increased the revenue for this team. Fantastic. But guess what? Your revenue is not going to go up if your team goes 3-13 for 4 years in a row. Justin Fields had the #1 jersey sale entering the season. That is a cash machine. If you put this kid in a scenario where he's going to win, guess what? Revenue is going to skyrocket. You're going to be able to finance your new stadium. You're going to be able to bring in whatever talent, whatever coach you want. You're going to be on Sunday Night Football every night. You're going to be on Monday Night Football every night. The decision, business-wise, is to hand over making football decisions for this team to somebody who understands modern football and allows the team to win. That's the best decision you can make as a businessman. If your business is football, you should probably know a thing or two about where the league is going and where the game is going. So don't continue to bring in coaches who don't know what they're doing or do know what they're doing and then surround them with staff that doesn't understand what they're doing. You just need a whole complete makeover from the front office down to the coaching staff. Except I do like Ryan Pace. I will defend Ryan Pace all day long. I think he has a really good grasp on where the game is going. I could just, by his draft alone, his drafting ability is fantastic. But that's all I'm going to say about that. Absolutely. Guys, and this is the last thing I'm going to say for fans that are out there that are upset that maybe watching this and are going, well, I don't know. I'm still not sold on Justin Fields. I want you to go back and I want you to look at Kyler Murray. I want you to look at Josh Allen. I want you to look at Russell Wilson. I want you to look at Aaron Rodgers. I want you to look at their rookie campaigns. I want you to look at their statistics their rookie year. And I want you to go back and look at Justin's through 5 games. And I want you to think, these guys weren't overnight successes, were they? No, they weren't. And don't just look at the win column. It's ridiculous. Kyler Murray, only 5 games his first year in the NFL. And now every team would give their kidney. Every guy in this country would give their kidney to have Kyler Murray on their team, right? It takes time. The Arizona Cardinals surrounded Kyler with talent. They were aggressive in the offseason. They brought in new coaching staffs. They brought in amazing new offensive talent. The Bears need to do the same, or else we're going to be stuck with another quarterback who has wasted potential in a city that literally has ex-players, Matt Forte on Twitter, talking about how much the organization is stuck in a pattern. When Matt Forte comes out on Twitter and complains, and Olin Kreutz comes out and complains, and Lance Briggs comes out and complains, future Hall of Famers complain about the organization, you know something needs to change. And my answer is the guy who's been there for all of those players' 10 years, Ted Phillips. He needs to be out of Chicago. We need a new CEO as soon as possible. But that's it for me.
And I'm just going to add this on. This isn't a terrible roster by any means. Does it have its holes? Yeah. But the problem is this is Bears fans are also expecting this roster to have absolutely 0 holes. You need to just temper your expectations. This isn't a terrible roster by any means. This is a roster where it's a team that's basically going to be tough and gritty and scratch its way to every single win. It's just what the Bears' identity is right now. There's very few impact players. All right. But hey, guess what? It is a roster with solid coaching that's good enough to overcome a couple mistakes here and there and basically win games. All right. But unfortunately, right now, everything seems to be trending in the right direction. I'm sorry, in the wrong direction, I should say. So that's ultimately where we're at, and what the Bears are going to have to do here is it's like, against the 49ers. We're going to be previewing the game on Thursday afternoon right here, guys. We'll drop that video for you Friday morning. But before we get out of here, listen, make sure you follow us on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. Follow myself and Max on Twitter at Max Smith ESM and at Usayd Koshal. Be sure to check out our weekly show, which we record on Tuesday nights. It's ready to go by 11:59 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday night. We're going to get out of here, guys. Bear down, peace out. And if you see anyone saying that Justin Fields is Mitch Trubisky 2.0 simply because he's playing bad, you know what? Stats do not define the development of a player by any means. Stats are incredibly deceiving. Yeah, tell them that they're completely wrong and tell them to come watch this video. But we're going to get out of here. Peace out, guys.